For my YouTube video this month, I'm going to talk about something that is rather complicated and technical. So before we start that, I'm going to show a video from my life for the people who aren't boot makers or leather workers, but they only watch this because they love me. Hi, Mom. So I bought myself something. I bought a pull-up bar. And Dale hung it up for me yesterday, and I have a really big goal. My goal is to be able to do one pull-up. If I ever achieve that, we'll see if I can make bigger goals. So, let's see how close I am. Dale hung the pull-up bar to where I couldn't reach it, so I have to have a chair to help me out. Alright, I'm going to try to do one pull-up. Oh, that's as close as I am right now. I'll keep working on it and see if I ever achieve my goal of a single pull-up. Day 2 of the pull-up challenge. I'm trying not to jump up and grab it because I don't want to use my momentum from jumping to pretend I've done a pull-up. Okay, here we go. So close, but there's still much work to do. What I'm going to talk about this month is how to create a cowboy boot top pattern from the client's measurements. So we're going to start out, we've got a client with a heel measurement of 13 3/8 and a calf measurement of 15 inches. Now there's several variables when you're making a cowboy boot top, and we'll have to stop and talk about those. The first important variable that we'll talk about is the calf measurement. For the heel measurement, you pretty much use the heel measurement as is, unless you're wanting to make the boot go on loosely or go on extra tight. How you cut the calf measurement can vary. For instance, if you have a cowboy boot with a really deep scallop, you don't have to cut the calf measurement as big because that scallop is going to open up and give more room in the calf. If you have a cowboy boot that has a stovepipe top, you do need to add some extra, because that stovepipe top isn't going to open up at all, and if their calf measurement is 15 and you cut the boot at 15, it's going to be hugging their calves very tightly, and that's not comfortable. Usually for a cowboy boot, you want the cowboy boot tops to be about 1 inch bigger than the customer's calves. This can also vary a little. If they're going to be tucking their jeans into their boots, they need more room. If they will never tuck their jeans in and maybe they'll be wearing with really thin socks and they don't like a lot of extra room, then you might want a little bit less. So when you look at your calf measurement, that's one thing you need to think about is, will they be wearing their jeans tucked in, and how deep is the scallop, or is there a scallop at all? My hypothetical customer has a short heel measurement of 13 3/8 and a calf measurement of 15. And I'm going to put my usual scallop on this, which is a 2.5 inch scallop. It dips down 2.5 inches onto the boot. And so with a 15 inch calf measurement, I'm going to make this one at 15 5/8. That's how I'm going to cut it. This is going to open up a little, but not too much. So now I have 13 3/8 for the short heel and 15 5/8 for the calf measurement. First thing I'm going to do is to create a rectangle that's big enough to accommodate my pattern. So my calf measurement, that's the largest measurement, it's 15 5/8. What I want to do is create a rectangle that's wide enough to accommodate that and exactly the right height. If I cut this square or rectangle 9 inches wide, keeping in mind that now I'm working with half because this paper pattern is just for one panel. There's a front panel and a back panel. So now I'm working with half to create this panel. If I cut this 9 inches wide and mark the center, that will give me a piece of paper that would accommodate an 18 inch calf. And mine is not quite 16, so I know it's wide enough. The first measurement is just make it big enough that you can create your pattern. Now we're going to make this piece of paper exactly the right height for our boot top. This customer, the fullest part of his calf is at 14 inches up the leg, and he wants a boot that's 14 inches tall. So we start with 14 inches, but remember a cowboy boot has a vamp and counter. So we're going to take 2 inches off for the vamp and counter. But the boot top needs to extend under that vamp and counter. That's the seam allowance. So we're going to add a 1/2 inch for a seam allowance. And then I was always taught to add another 1/4 inch just because over time the cowboy boots start to sag a little and lose a bit of height. We've got the boot height minus 2 inches plus a 1/2 plus a 1/4, or the boot height minus 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to cut a pattern that is exactly 12 3/4 inches tall. Okay, so what I have here is a poster board pattern that is the correct height for this boot top, and it's wide enough that I can create my pattern, and I scored it down the center. Before I was working with 1/2 a boot, front panel, back panel, 1/2. Now I'm folding it in 1/2, and now I'm working with a 1/4 of the boot panel. From the bottom, I'm going to make a mark at 1/2 inch up. That's my seam allowance line. Remember I said it's going to have to extend under the vamp and counter. And then I'm going to make another mark at 4.5 inches up. That bottom one is the seam allowance line. The top one is the pass line. That's the point when a person points their toes to go into the cowboy boot and they begin going in, and then where the heel begins to make that curve so that it can go flat, that's the pass line. All right, I'm going to write the heel measurement down on the seam allowance line, my heel measurement of 13 3/8. And up at the top, I'm going to write my 15 5/8, which is where I'm cutting the calf measurement. Now at this point, it's easier to convert your inches to millimeters, or you can just work with millimeters in the first place. But I was trained to work with inches, and that's what I'm more comfortable with. But it's certainly easier to convert to millimeters at this point. 15 5/8 is 397 millimeters, and 13 3/8 is 340 millimeters. I'm going to divide 340 millimeters by 4. That gives me 85. I'm going to circle that because I need that measurement. And then there's going to be a seam here, so I need to add a seam allowance. And for my machine, that's set at 4 millimeters. So I'm going to add 4 millimeters to 85. That gives me 89. I'm going to circle that one too. Okay, at the calf measurement, we've got 397 millimeters divided by 4 equals 99 millimeters. And now we need to add the seam allowance. So that's 103, and I'm going to circle that one. Don't need the 99 except to get to the 103. So at the very top, I'm going to make a mark at 103 millimeters. Here, I'm not going to work from the bottom. I'm going to put these marks on the seam allowance line. The seam allowance line is the line I'm working with, not the bottom of the pattern. I'm going to make a mark at both 85 and 89. Now I'm going to connect the calf measurement in the outermost one of the short heel marks. And then I'm going to go back from the pass line down to that second mark I made at the 85 millimeters. From the pass line down, I'm going to create another angle. So what I've done here is create 2 angles. There's one long angle down to the pass line and another angle from the pass line in. I've cut off the seam allowance right down here at the heel measurement. The reason I can get away with doing that is because the front of the boot top panel is shaped like this at the bottom, and it's going to open up a little bit as you put your foot in. I cut off that secondary angle and removed the seam allowance for 2 reasons. Jay Griffith, my old mentor, always said that a cowboy boot should look like a Coke bottle or a beautiful woman, and then he would do an hourglass shape with his hands. So we want that pretty waist in there. Also, because cowboy boots don't have any buckles or laces, you really need a snug fit as you're pulling it on. Obviously, you have to be able to get into it, but at the same time, once you're in, you don't want to be slopping around inside. So we want to take out all of the excess and leave just enough for it to flex open and get your foot in and then hold you in place once you're in the boot. Speaking of that hourglass shape, let's go back to the calf measurement for a little bit. When you're creating your boot top pattern, take the short heel measurement and add 1.5 inches. If the customer's actual calf measurement is bigger than this new measurement that you've created, then use their actual calf measurement. But if their calf measurement is smaller, then use the new number and disregard their calf measurement. One more thing about calf measurements. This person, the fullest part of his calf was at 14 inches tall, and that's how high he wanted his boots. So we just worked with that height to create the boot top pattern. But let's say he wanted a short boot. If he had wanted a 10-inch tall boot, I would have still created a 14-inch tall pattern to get this angle correct. And then I would have cut 4 inches off of it to bring me down to a 10-inch tall pattern. You waste a little paper, but you get the correct angle here. If he had wanted an 18-inch tall boot, then I would have gone ahead and cut an 18-inch tall pattern, but when I was putting in the calf measurement, I would have put that in at 14 inches tall and created my angle all the way up based on the fullest part of where the fullest part of his calf was. So there you have it. I created a cowboy boot top panel. I'll cut 4 of these, 2 fronts, 2 backs. This is for a customer with a 13 3/8 heel measurement, a 15-inch calf, which I cut at 15 5/8, so it will open up a little bit and give him the approximately inch of allowance that you want for a cowboy boot top. If he had had a stovepipe top, I might have added a little more. If he had a really deep scallop, I might have added less. If he had had an 18-inch tall boot, I would have made this pattern 4 inches taller, but I still would have put the measurements for his calf at 14 inches because that's where the fullest part of his calf is. If he'd had a 10-inch tall boot, I would have created the pattern the same so that I would get the correct angle, and then I would have cut 4 inches off to make my 10-inch tall boot pattern.